did I indicate only one closing argument?
No, I think you indicated two. They get two, we get one, right?
Well, it depends. If we do it in the new, I think I'll do it the other way. You can open, you can close first, you'll close last, which is one closing argument. So the plaintiffs give their closing arguments first.
Good afternoon, jury members. Very nice to meet you. I know that it's very hard because we have never met before, so it's kind of hard for you to understand one of us. I'm from the opposite side of the world. I'm from Vietnam. But I know that as we're human, we may be different in color, hair, skin, but there is one thing that we can connect to each other, is the hope and trust. We hope that when anyone gives us a promise, he or she will do that. That's how we build the relationship. And in this story, I would like to share with you that we talk about insurance. We all know about insurance. For a student, we need the health insurance. More mature, we need the labor insurance. And when we are old, we need the life insurance. And everyone who gets insurance hopes that the insurer will implement his promise when the trouble comes to us, so we can deal with the financial burden that we may face. Likewise, the Frank Hyde and his family. Frank Hyde is a happy man with his family, one wife, 4 young children. He works hard because of them, because he wanted to ensure that each and every child of him can go to college and have a better life. And he bought the insurance from the defendant because of them. But not once, but twice. But he raises the threshold of insurance higher when he welcomed the twin members of the jury. In this case, sometimes he got drunk because of when sorrow comes, he just tried to release it by finding drink. And gradually, it became his hobby. And just one day, he got drunk with his colleague, Mr. Seven. Mr. Seven told you that he drank very much that night, about 5 beers and 5 or 6 beers mixed with whiskey or something like that. It was a big man. And I agree with you that the more we drink, the more we are tolerant toward the alcoholic beverage. But one thing we should know better is that the more you drink, gradually from year to year, our body will diminish its function. And in that sense, we will become reverse tolerant, given that just a few shots of drink can knock you out. That's the case of Frank Hyde. And before the accident, what did the Mrs. Georgia Hyde told you? Frank Hyde was a very ambitious man. He loved his family. He always tried very hard to raise them up and give them a happy life. Also, Dr. Liu just told you that no way he could commit suicide because of his family, his wife, and 4 young children. And members of the jury, at that night, he just said goodbye to his fellows because with the notice of termination, he knew that he would never have any chance to come back to the workplace, to say goodbye to each and every fellow that he had worked with for many years before that. But he didn't say goodbye to his wife, he didn't say goodbye to any child of him just before the accident. And then, when the accident came, he was drunk at that time. And in this case, there is no evidence indicating otherwise. Then the testimony from the officer Fryman that he was presumed drunk by law. with such alcohol effervescent stage in the blood. And members of the jury, Officer Fryman also let us know that at the night, with the physical evidence, it may indicate to various of the causes leading to the same physical evidence. Many times that he confirmed with us that he personally himself considers it was an accident, it was a suicide. But also, we just remember how many times that he told us that it was just purely his speculation, his conclusion based on the physical evidence. And we all know that with the same physical evidence, it may lead to various causes. For example, if I have my iPhone, I just use the example of the defendant, and I drop it. Maybe I intentionally throw it strongly to drop it to get the insurance, or maybe I just drop it inadvertently. So the physical evidence can lead to many, many different causes. And he also confirmed to us that, the Officer Fryman, that maybe because he got unintentional mistake between the brake accelerator, and it could lead to the same physical evidence that it just hit to the tree straight in 25 yards, which you can imagine this corner of the room to that corner of the room, a very short distance. And also, we know that that was the first time of the Officer Fryman to conduct such a hitting that he classified as suicide, like he got no experience before that. And moreover, Your Honor, the policy of the police station states very clearly that all such conclusion is discouraged to disclose to the public. As a result, what we just heard from the physical evidence and report of the Officer Fryman is just like an unfinished food. And they just come here to show us the process of making food. But we know for sure that that food is not finished, is not ripped first to enjoy it, to reach the very firm conclusion. We need more like the recipe or spices on the mental state of the victim at that current time. We need more of whether with those evidence we can lead to only one, nothing but just one conclusion, that whether he was committing suicide or not. We lack those information. And member of the jury, my last statement I would like to share with you that in this case, the burden of proof is on the defendant. And given that, when you come to the deliberation room, you just weigh the both sides, whether the defendant has fulfilled his obligation to make sure that there is no cause that we can infer from the information that you can receive. And if you can find multiple causes that can lead to the same physical evidence, can lead to the same conclusion, can lead to the same testimonies, then you have to ask the defendant to implement his promise. Members of the jury, maybe I've talked so much words, and my only point, I hope you can remember what I share with you, is that I have no power to decide the case. You all concur the power to determine where is the justice. It's not only the one widow, 4 children who are waiting for your decision, but the thousands of all the insurance policy holders who hope that when they face into accident, they will give what the insurers promised to them. Thank you.
Okay. Defense?
Members of the jury, thank you so much for being here today. I know it's been a long trial and sitting through a lot of details, tedious details, hearing lots of testimonies. So we really do appreciate you coming today to decide this case. And There have been a lot of details, and I would just like to sum up now what I consider the most important details for you to remember as you go back into the deliberation room and decide how you're going to come out on this case. First, that there was indeed an insurance policy, and that there was an agreement between Mr. Hyde and the insurance company that I represent, Beneficial Insurance Company. That contract said that we would cover Mr. Hyde in any circumstances of an accident if he lost his life, with the exception of suicide. And Mr. Hyde, as was testified by the insurance representative, fully was aware of the contract. It's a simple contract, 1 page, very easy to understand, and it explicitly spells out that suicide will not be covered. We know that business agreements absolutely have to be stood by. If business is going to continue in an acceptable way, contracts have to be honored. People have to stand by their agreements. And the plaintiffs would have you believe that we are not wanting to abide by our agreement, that the agreement was not that Mr. Hyde did not know, or he was not fully informed about the provisions in the agreement, when in fact he was aware of the agreement, and we are completely ready to honor the agreement. If you do find that this was not a suicide, we will be happy to pay out $1 million the very next day. But we are convinced, as I believe you have seen, and you will be able to talk amongst yourselves, that there has not been any evidence to refute that this was not a suicide. Let me go back and talk about the details. So how are you going to know that this wasn't a suicide? Well, first you have to look at, was there a motive for suicide? And second, you have to look at what actually happened the day that the death occurred. You can't just look at motive, of course. If he was happy or not, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to look at what happened. And is there any possible explanation other than suicide that is credible to you? So we first talked about the situation that happened 5 years ago. Mr. Hyde had been hoping for a promotion in his job. He had been at his job for a while. He had considered himself to be eligible and the best man to rise up in the ranks and get that promotion. And he didn't get it. And he went home, and this is where we see the tendencies that Mr. Hyde had, unfortunately, that he was not able to cope with severe stresses, severe setbacks in his life. He didn't have the promotion. He didn't think he would continue, he wouldn't be able to move up in life in the way that he had hoped. And he took a whole bottle of Valium with the intention of losing his life. You heard his response to the doctor when questioned on that. He got angry and said, "I would not kill myself in my house." And he further continued to talk about death. That was the first setback. And you heard from many witnesses, the friend who took the stand and talked about their discussions at the bar and at work. You heard from Mrs. Hyde herself. You heard from the doctor that he was never quite the same. He was bumping along ever since that first incident. He was bumping along life. And he led a normal life still. He had both internal private life, but also a public life that could have been viewed quite normally. He continued to work. He continued to provide for his family. He took out an insurance policy responsibly so that his family would be provided for if he were to ever die. But internally, he was suffering. He was suffering so much that he tried to self-medicate through alcoholism. He was drinking constantly ever since that incident and never quit. You heard that from Mrs. Hyde. You heard that from the doctors. You heard that from his friend. And he was wrestling that entire time with the thought of ending his life. He had thought it once before, he had attempted it once before, it didn't work out, but he never quit thinking about the possibility that perhaps, as in his words, I'm worth more dead than I am alive. And as he drove the roads home each night on Highway 95, he saw that tree, and as he rounded that corner, and perhaps many times he looked at that tree and thought to himself, this would be, that's a tree that I could drive into. This is a way that I could commit suicide. And, time went on, and again, he was put in a situation where he had hope. Just like he had hope for the promotion, he had hope once more that he would be able to open up a new business, that he was going to be able to start the sports bar that he had been dreaming about. But at that moment, he went to work and found in his office a pink slip that said, "You have been terminated." He was no longer eligible for work. He was no longer eligible to continue saving money to open up his future business. And you can imagine that this would be devastating, especially for a man who is already suffering from diagnosed severe depression, as you heard from the doctor. And we go then to what happened that night. And this was explained very well by the officer that came and was first on the scene to respond. And the plaintiff's counsel described his testimony as, being open to other possibilities that this could have been an accident, when in fact you all heard that the officer believed wholeheartedly that there was no other explanation. He had considered all the other explanations. This wasn't an accident where the person had fallen asleep at the wheel. The skid marks of it peeling out on the road demonstrated that this was not somebody who had fallen asleep at the wheel and let their foot down on the gas pedal. This wasn't an accident involving somebody who had swerved to try and get around a deer. It was a straight shot to a tree that he had looked at many times before. And on that night, as he drove home, emboldened by all the alcohol that he had consumed with his friend in the bar, emboldened, impassioned, severely depressed, seeing no other way out, he saw that tree, stopped his car, backed up, peeled out, and went straight into the tree and ended his life. His wife was calling him, trying to get in touch with him the entire for most of the night, trying to call him. Of course, he didn't answer the phone and say goodbye. If he was committed to ending his life, he knew that she would be cared for. He was confident that he was better off dead than alive because he had taken out that policy. He knew that policy said his family would receive $1 million if he were to die by accident. He knew that tree would make this look like this were an accident. He knew that if he were to go now, his family would receive that and they would be okay. He didn't want her to talk him out of taking his own life. If he picked up that phone and told her goodbye, what do you think she would have said? She would have pleaded with him to stop. But he thought it was in the best interest, sadly, the best interest of his family to take his life. And that is what he did. The officer explained to you that without even seeing any evidence of the mental state of Mr. Hyde, he concluded solely on physical evidence that this was a suicide. He had seen many, many, many car crashes, many accidents over the course of his career, but this was the first one he had seen that looked like every single element was in place that he could not deny from every piece of evidence that this was suicide. The plaintiffs offered no alternative explanation for how a car could have gone almost 100 yards straight shot not slowing down, peeling out from the start, and gone straight into a tree. They offered no alternative explanation. He was drunk, yes indeed. We all know that he was drunk, and the officer, you heard him testify, that drunk people do not behave this way. They swerve off the road, they lose control of the car. Drunk people are emboldened and impassioned to make irrational decisions, and that is indeed what happened tonight. We are, as representing the insurance company, we are committed to helping our customers who have good claims, who have valid claims. We will always pay out on those claims, and you heard testimony from the insurance representative that our insurance company does indeed pay out on many, many, many claims that are good claims. But when we see a claim that has evidence that there has been a suicide, an intentional taking of one's life, we must abide by our own agreements, and we must honor the contracts that we make. And in this contract, we have said, and Mr. Hyde agreed, that in cases of suicide, the contract does not have, or the beneficiaries are not entitled to be paid out. We ask you again to think about the evidence for what happened that night. How are you going to decide what happened? Think about the concrete evidence of the car going off the road in a straight line, almost 100 yards, and going straight into a tree. And think about if there was any alternative explanation that the officer offered, or that the officer was not able to refute by his many, many years of experience. Also think about all the motives that Mr. Hyde had, his history of depression, his history of suicidal attempts, and his history of caring for his family and knowing that they would be okay in this situation. And I think if you think about those things, you will not be able to say, just as we were not able to say that this was an accident. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we would ask you in this case that when you see this verdict form, you'll find that there are two places that you can check. If you believe that the defendant beneficial life insurance company is not obligated to pay out on this policy because this was an intentional suicide, we ask you that you will check the box next to their names and make sure that justice is done in this case. And we thank you for your time. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've come to that point in the case where you now do your job, which is to deliberate and see if you can reach a verdict. One of you asked me, and I'll remind you, what the exact definition of suicide is. Let's be clear. A suicide would be if Frank Hyde drove his car into the tree with the intent to take his own life. That's a suicide. If it was an accident, it's not a suicide. And the only issue for you to decide, I'm going to repeat what I said before, is whether Frank Hyde intended to take his own life on the night he died. The insurance company has the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that it's more likely than not that he had the intent to take his own life. If you find that it is more probable than not that he did have that intent, your verdict must be for the defendant, and you would check on the verdict form next to the defendant beneficial insurance company. If you find otherwise, your verdict must be for the plaintiff, and you would check plaintiff. So normally, the jury would retire to a jury room, which we don't have. So what we will do is, we will retire, lawyers, witnesses, and let you deliberate. Was this trial being filmed? Did you film this?
Yes.
So it's still on, right?
Yes.
Let's leave it on. So, if you don't mind, one reason we leave it on during the deliberations is, you can say whatever you want about anyone and the trial, and you won't have to worry about their hearing it till later. And you'll be gone, you know, and it won't make any difference. So every jury has a foreperson, and I will make you, since you're seated here, in the number one slot, you're the foreperson of the jury. Now, the foreperson of the jury has no additional powers other, above any other juror except one. When you finally reach a verdict, the foreperson will be the one who fills this out. If we're early, so if when you deliberate, if you're unanimous, right off the bat, that's fine. If you're not, see if you can deliberate for a while and persuade each other so that you're unanimous. If it turns out you can't, then the foreperson would write the number of votes for the plaintiff and the number of votes for the defendant next to each of them. So wait till we get out of the room, and then you can deliberate any way you like. So we will go out. And we'll be out in the hall, so one of you just come when you're done.
You wanna leave here or? Yeah, they're very colorful.
What is everybody thinking?
I don't think it was a suicide.
I think it was
Suicide.
Well,
I think it was.
okay, so the first thing we learned in health class is
Right.
like, about suicide is that there are always warning signs. And if the last warning sign was like 4 years prior, I think that's kind of like,
I mean, depression is the hardest thing to spot in another person. Like, there are warning
Yes, I
signs, but it's
know.
not a
if
guarantee.
you live with the person though, you have a lot more of a tendency to see that they're depressed, and there's a lot more of a history than just one accident with that. And then, sorry, but like, in my
No, no,
opinion, like, it's kind of easy if you're drunk and they were going around a bend and they lost. I saw Christiana coming off turn one day. We were driving to chorus one morning, and it was on Monticello Trail, and the road was windy. You know, she was sober, but it was wet, and she almost skid off the side of the road. Like, if you're going a little too fast, you had too much to drink, and there was already a bend, it's
I feel
not
like,
unlikely that he just,
so I feel
like
like
that, and
the
reflexes
skid marks are
slow.
what argue that against that for me.
Yeah,
Like,
they
if he
really
was
don't.
going so fast going around the turn, I feel like there would be skids going around the turn.
Where were the skid marks?
Yeah.
where were they?
They were on the straight part, the very beginning.
You got 100 yards to make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you're drunk, your
I mean, like,
reflexes
I'll
are not.
agree.
Okay, from
The
here to
drunk makes
here,
The drunk makes
Okay.
it gray area.
100 yards is that wall to that wall.
U.S. warning sign. No, that's not.
No, that's
Yeah.
25
Have you
yards.
ever watched football?
About a
Yes,
football
wait,
field.
I have.
The
And then-
warning signs would have been increased drinking throughout the 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's
And,
pretty
I
good.
mean, I was depressed for like 2 years, my parents didn't know, and they were surprised when I mentioned it, like, sometimes you can tell, but not necessarily. And, I mean, there were, his
He
wife
knew.
was worried about him, that is a warning sign.
But if the man loved his family, he would have said goodbye.
Not necessarily. That would have incriminated him.
No, it wouldn't. If
Yeah.
he just picked up the phone and said, honey, I love you, I'll be
No, I
home
mean,
soon,
if he had, no, but if
he would have wanted to talk to his wife.
No,
That's
That's
different.
different from saying goodbye, cause goodbye
He would have wanted to
is-
talk to her.
Not
No,
necessarily.
when he saw the phone coming, he knew that if he answered the phone, call, he will stop. He cannot suicide.
Yeah.
He will change his mind. So he decided not to
Yeah.
stop the phone
And-
call and crash it in.
Then why wouldn't he have answered to cough himself out of the suicide? Like, I don't think anyone genuinely wants to die that much.
What I
He
have.
said goodbye to the fellas. I mean, he had a 2-week notice, so
Yeah.
he would have still had to go to work for the next 2
Yeah.
weeks, but he had already made
I
up
think
his
you have
mind
the
that he
option to
wasn't.
go to the next week, I don't think.
What I have read about
To collect the payment.
suicides is that most people don't want to kill themselves once they're faced with their mortality. It's like people who jump off a bridge. When
Right,
they're
right.
in the air, they don't want to, but up until that point, they think it's a good idea.
I think he would have told his wife that he loved her one last time. I think that's the
I
key
can
fact.
see the emotional appeal, but I think the situation would have made him rather single-minded about it.
And I think he's saying, I personally would have, that feel like he would have wanted to say goodbye, like we don't, obviously he's a fictitious character, but like we,
Yeah.
based on what we know, we
Yeah.
don't know how he acted, I mean, how
Yeah.
he would have acted in tragedy, and obviously,
Yeah.
the only tragedy that we know he reacted to was with the
Yeah.
potential.
And, I mean, he doesn't appear to me like the kind of person who easily access his emotions. The resistance to admitting that he's depressed, the resistance to getting
I'm a
treatment
female,
to that.
so
Well, no, I
I
mean,
view things a
that's,
lot differently.
no, but that's true
Wait,
about
wait,
me. so
100
it's not
yards is
that,
a
just
football
saying.
field?
Yes.
Technically, it's 120, but if you take off end zones.
Then, how, like, the guy kept saying, like, he passed that tree every day. He probably could not see that tree 100 yards away, just.
5-foot tree.
I mean, he might not have been aiming for the
5 foot
tree
tree.
specifically. If
Well,
he's
no,
just
I know.
going off and
That
saying,
just-
I'll hit something,
kept
you
saying.
know?
And what about the skid marks?
Yeah.
I didn't get that part.
Skid marks is
So-
shows acceleration, and nobody
Yeah.
accelerates.
If
like
you
that.
if you
So
After
wait,
that curve.
after the curve, he started accelerating?
Yes, with
yeah.
another curve,
The way
25 yards away.
that
You ever
the
seen me
police
drive?
officer,
He said-
the way that the police
Just
officer
saying.
explained it was that he had come around the curve at a low speed,
Very
had
low
took his
speed.
foot and gone boom on the accelerator, because that's what you take to get the rubber off your tires. I mean, it's not easy. You gotta have a large
And
amount.
if he was coming around the turn fast, he probably would have skid over
Yeah,
to the
would have
left.
hit.
So
Would have gone off.
He
the
probably-
turn.
he probably will stop and then,
Stop, you're at a low speed or something.
or
yeah.
it would have to be a very low speed.
And just with the physical evidence alone, cop was able to see that it was a suicide, even though he had no like previous record of ever deeming an accident a suicide before. So
That-
it
that's-
would
But
have
also
been
that was-
pretty, had to be pretty defining in order
Yeah.
for him to change his mind.
I doubt.
Didn't he say that, I don't know, he said something and then they said something else, like they kind of contradicted themselves.
Yeah.
Didn't he say that he thought a couple was before, but they were never deemed suicides?
He said he had seen a few where
There-
it was possible, but they had
People
never,
had expected.
yeah, but it never was.
It takes a
What
lot.
were you
to be
thinking?
suicide.
Because you said that it wasn't suicide either.
Well, I mean, with him being drunk, I think that could have factored in, you know, I know that, like, when I'm tired and driving at night, it's hard for me to see things, and, like, even though I go the same way every night, it doesn't mean I know the way I'm going, like, it's different at night. And, I don't know, because with the skid marks, you know, he had to have stopped, or he was, like, going really, really slow.
Why would you speed up like
Awesome.
suddenly, go up?
Yeah.
But if he was drunk also, it might have been he was going really slow and then he's like, oh, I'm going really slow, and then he just
Yeah.
slammed it by mistake. You know, I don't think it's
The thing is,
definitely.
when you
I
got out of
He
the
would have
wheel,
had to been
He had
really,
no-
I mean,
really,
like-
really smacked in order
He
to
was.
say go
I
from
like
0 to
The
100.
friend said, like, he didn't know how many he had.
Yeah, he said it was
So
past point of even.
6'3".
Okay, why
can
did the
see
police
it,
officer
but-
not run like a, you know, when they examine the body? Yeah, why
They
didn't
don't
they
do
have
it
the alcohol
immediately at
level?
the scene. They do it
No, I know,
after
but
the
they do it
crime.
after, so
Yeah.
don't they have that result, so
Yeah,
should they
he
know
got-
his blood alcohol
They
level?
said.
They did.
One
yeah,
point
Like,
three.
did I miss
It
it?
was
What was
1.3%.
Which is surprising to me.
0.13 you said?
No,
No,
1.3.
which is incredibly
Since
high.
Isn't
0.08 is the
like
legal
point
limit,
zero
yes.
So he was
very
incredibly
careful.
smashed.
It was probably all of those last drinks were coming on
I'm just
at
saying,
once.
you're not thinking straight, so I don't think your intent is clear. You can't,
So
he didn't
decreased
have a
decision
clear
making.
intent.
Right, decreased decision making.
Yeah.
So in that
I-
moment, he might have believed that
Suppose I
he
view.
was worth more dead.
Yeah. I do
I think
suppose
he
I
just said that
view
on the
it-
spur of the moment.
Here's the question, if someone got really drunk and took a whole bunch of pills, would that count as a suicide? Because to me, when you get drunk, it lowers your inhibition, so that doesn't mean the intent
People are saying like
isn't there.
the truth, you're more truthful when you're drunk,
Yeah,
but I don't,
you're more likely to do what you emotionally
you're
want
also
to, what you
more
intellectually
emotionally
wish you wanted
unstable,
to.
you're also more aggressive.
But does that mean that it's not intent? Because.
I think if you're not sober, you don't have the ability to make that decision.
So if someone gets drunk and hangs themselves, that's not a suicide.
Well, hanging yourself takes a little more preparation.
I think
No,
the
it
point that we're, no,
It does.
You have some sort of decision.
And
Right,
back
but-
to
I
what you
mean,
say when you
even
drive
it's the
home at
littlest
night.
possible thing.
If you pull up the
You have-
building,
Yeah.
being a lot drunk, they could not be seen as
Well,
suicide.
then you might just stumble, like.
But like hanging yourself.
Like
tying
I
the
know a
rope,
girl who hung herself, and it took a lot more preparation.
Like
To do
you're
that
drunk
one.
and you
So
wanna
change
hang
it.
the rope.
If someone got drunk and took a whole bunch of pills, is that suicide? Because that takes a lot less
Depends.
preparation.
But that might have just been a mistake. Okay, wait.
Yeah, I mean,
Do the wrong pill.
well, it kind of.
I've done that, okay?
Yeah, but it depends on how much more you would have had to take. If you took, 3 instead of 1, I could see mistake. If you took 10
He
instead
said,
of 1,
yeah, 6 or 7.
yeah, so that's getting to be a
Okay,
lot.
but the case with the Valium, he came home. He could have figured out some other way to kill himself before he got home, but he came home and he spent time with his wife before he, let's say he was trying to commit suicide, let's say that. He spent time with his wife and children before he committed suicide.
Did you notice he also didn't reach out? They talked, but I didn't get the sense they were talking, about how he was feeling. He was present, but he wasn't emotionally
moping.
connecting.
That's
Yeah,
what
he
she
was
said.
moping, yeah.
But my point is, he wanted to say goodbye to her.
I don't know if I would consider that saying goodbye. I think
She
part of
just-
that's
the
routine.
Not
The
physically
means
saying
to his
goodbye.
suicide was just sitting in the house, and that suicide probably wasn't, that attempted suicide didn't really have to be his plan. It's like you said,
Yeah.
hanging may take more planning, that was easy,
Yeah,
as
I'm
is
sorry about that.
this
I,
is easy.
I will say I do not think
You know.
that if he was a mile off the road, he had been planning this. I think that was
Yeah.
I see an opportunity and I'm going to take it.
Exactly.
So he's suicide.
And when you say like you don't, when you're driving home late at night and you're getting home but you don't know exactly what you're doing, same thing could have been for this. Even though he was driving home and he had decreased decision making, he still knew that tree was there. I could probably drive a little bit away, not a lot, but like with part of the ways with like my eyes closed and not even paying attention. To be totally
Please don't
honest,
do that.
because I drive like the same road 6 or 7 times a day, I know it
Yeah.
pretty good, pretty well, excuse me. So, when you say that, like it doesn't go back to decision making. It's spur of the moment. It's just
And
he.
I would have
Did
expected.
have the
fish
ability
or
to
something.
make a conscious thought that I want to die when his blood alcohol level is 1.3? Did,
Yes.
did he have the ability to even think?
He had the
that-
ability to choose to drive.
Exactly. And he had the ability to he had reflexes enough to get down the road without ever running into anybody else.
Because
Sure,
suicide
95
isn't,
cent
Might have been
traffic curve.
suicide, I
Even
feel like
though-
especially spur of the moment, isn't an intellectual intent, it's an emotional intent. So it's not, high decision making, it's not
Don't
smart,
think you
focused,
can be held accountable for your actions.
when you're that
Well, then
drunk.
who are you going to give it to?
Yeah.
Because
I don't-
it couldn't be
I don't
deemed as
think-
an accident.
Wait, so
Because
it,
in some
when
part of
people are
himself,
that
he
drunk,
made
or
the
they-
decision to do it. Even if it wasn't his full conscious being doing it, he still pulled the trigger,
Yeah.
if you will.
And-
Maybe he didn't.
here's the
know
other
all of
question
it,
I
but-
have.
And I'm also really biased because I want the family to get the money.
Believe me, so I so want the family to get the money.
Let's be honest.
But here's the other question, if people are that drunk and they're not responsible for anything else they do, if they break in and they steal something because they want it and they're drunk and they've got a low,
You know, your analogies are great, they all make sense, but.
yeah, I like to argue things by going to the
Where's
extreme and
Boston?
But this case,
Sorry.
you gotta decide, he suicided or not? Not like,
Well,
did he actually
I think
suicide?
and it's
Well, no,
beyond a
same
it's
thing.
not, this isn't a criminal case where it's like beyond a reasonable doubt. It's what's more likely. And I think in this case, it is more likely that he knew he was committing
But as he was
suicide.
saying, if someone jumps off a bridge, before they hit the water, when they're in midair, and
Yeah.
either right after the jump or right before they hit the water, they have that thought of, oh shit, I don't wanna die.
some do, not
Let me-
always.
I know,
Some
but
do.
let me, if he had 100 yards to make that decision, if he had that long to make that decision, don't you think he would have had that moment of, oh shit, I don't wanna die?
You ever tried to stop a single car going 65 miles an hour in
You turn.
10 yards?
I'm saying his reflexes weren't
Still hit a
strong
tree.
enough.
He was going into the woods,
I
right?
mean, that would make sense, because
So
it's
would you
not,
rather
I'm
die or
just
would you
saying-
rather be a
It's a tree in
paraplegic?
front of
and
you.
it's
yeah.
not,
It's
well,
smaller.
And also, if you're saying he's conscious enough to make this decision, you're saying like, oh, he's worth more dead than alive. Don't you think he would realize, oh wait, shit, they don't get any money if I kill myself? He knew that.
I don't think
So
he
why
was
would he do
thinking,
that?
I don't think he was thinking logically.
Because we're sitting here arguing about it and he has a chance that his family's getting the money.
Yeah.
He never had a chance that his family's getting the money if he were sitting here with us.
He's
And-
drunk and he only can think of $1 million. He didn't
Yeah.
think of any other things that said,
But if he's
say
thinking about
suicidal.
that,
I think,
I don't know, my,
here's the
I
sense,
was-
here's the sense of what I was getting that his mindset was at. He had years of frustration of being in the same place. He had a history of there is an ability of human beings worked themselves into this idea that there was nothing I can do to change my fate. And we've seen, and this is a proven thing, people get into this. And I think he had that, and this one last thing of, I can't do anything. I cannot do anything to help my family. He's got all of that going through his head. He's not particularly emotionally stable. He doesn't handle intense emotions well. And he's drunk.
Just because I agree.
Right. And so he makes, what if I do this? And it's an idea he's had in his head before. We can probably guess. And so I'm not a guarantee, but it might be. So he says, I'm gonna go for it. Boom. Especially if he's drunk, there's not that much time to make a different decision, to have that realization, and then looking inside yourself to say, I don't actually want to do this.
But he wasn't hopeless. And I know that the other lawyer tried to make the wife say that he was hopeless, but she refused to say that, and I think that has a lot, like, of merit to it.
Right.
You know, he wasn't hopeless. He still had goals. Even though he didn't have the money for it, he still had the goals. And I think if you have the goals to do something in the future, if you're in the mental mindset where you could say, okay, in a couple months or in a year or two, I want to do this.
Yeah.
You're not thinking, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. My family's better without me. No, you're thinking of what I can do in the future. He had goals. I don't.
Oh, you can go.
His idea for the sports bar, his goal was to open a sports bar. She specific, if we're going back to what she said,
Right.
she said that was specifically so that he could support his 4 children and send them to college. $1 million is enough to send 4 children to college. And so that was his goal. And so by
Give
dying,
her
it
the
was,
money to let
but-
the children go to
but
college.
But
It's-
this isn't what we want to happen.
you got to take the bias out of it. It's a
Yeah.
fictitious event. It never happened. Nobody's getting money or
Well,
spending any money. So
and-
you kind of, if you were to see this on TV, what happened? The man died and
Yeah.
committed suicide.
Well, and if we're going off of what she said she doesn't know about the finances, and everything we have, with all the small loans, all the kind of barely getting by, that is not money to open a sports bar, and him, having been in charge of the finances, would have known that.
The wife killed him.
Cut the brakes.
The wife got him drunk.
Okay. All right. Can we make a decision? They're pricing alcohol.
I say suicide.
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 All right,
Okay.
mark it.
It's so sad. I want the
It
children
is-
to have the money to go to college.
Believe me, the emotional appeal gets to me. It just isn't the decision
The
maker.
poor 2-year-olds.
No, if they said there were 4 kids.
On the other hand,
No, they were a year and a half when he died.
I'll go let him in.
Now he's like 3. They're not infants anymore. Oh my God, they're gonna grow up.
on the other hand, working
And
off.
poor, by the way. They're going to
Yeah.
grow poor.
Yeah, on the other hand, if they're coming from a low-income, one-parent family, they're getting a lot more financial aid.
Oh my Lord.
That's not
believe it,
real.
What's up, your dog?
to me.
I wonder what kind of neighborhood they grew up in.
One family with a sports bar.
That's good.
So, now the foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? May I have the verdict form, please? And are you unanimous?
Yes.
The jury's verdict is for the defendant, beneficial life. And would you like the jury polled, or are you satisfied?
Yeah, we can vote.
You want them polled? Madam Foreperson, is this in fact your verdict?
Yes.
Is it your verdict?
Yes.
And yours? 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 Yours?
Yes.
Yours?
Yes.
Yours? And yours? Okay? You wanna, you don't have to, do you wanna tell them what persuaded you the most, since you're unanimous?
Sure.
Go ahead, absolutely. I'm just,
We weren't unanimous to start, if that helps.
It took a bit of arguing.
I didn't want to agree.
Yeah, I think the police officer in the drawing, he couldn't see